Sun's a-settin'. This is what I'm gonna sing. Sun's a-settin'. This is what I'm gonna sing. I feel the blues a-comin'. I wonder what the blues will bring. A drowsy, syncopated tune, rocking back and forth to a mellow croon. I heard a Negro play. Down on Lenox Avenue the other night, by the pale, dull pallor of a one-bulb light, he did a lazy sway. He did a lazy sway to the tune of those weary blues. With his ebony hands on each ivory key, he made that poor piano moan with melody. Oh, blues. Swaying to and fro on his rickety stool, he played that sad, raggy tune like a musical fool. Sweet blues, coming from a black man's soul. Oh, blues. Deep song voice with a melancholy tone, I heard that Negro sing, that old piano moan. Ain't got nobody in all this world, ain't got nobody but myself. I was going to quit my frowning and put my troubles on the shelf. Thump, 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 when he's put on the floor. He played a few chords, then he sang some more. I got the weary blues, I can't be satisfied. Got the weary blues, I can't be satisfied. I ain't happy no more, and I wish that I had died. Far into the night, he crooned that tune. The stars went out, and so did the moon. The singer stopped playing and went to bed, while the weary blues echoed through his head. He slept like a rock, or a man that's dead.
Hello, and welcome back to the Maddis1 channel. I'm here with a very highly requested video. We are going to finally get into my Sinners review, which I'm so excited to get into. I just saw it for the third time last weekend, so I'm fresh off the boat, ready to discuss all the things that I thought I missed, all the little details that I think are important in the movie Sinners. Now, to be warned, this is not going to be your typical Sinners explanation. We're not going to really talk or spend a lot of time on Easter eggs. We're going to spend a lot of time on sociological themes and big spanning concepts. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction, do some housekeeping, and then we're going to get straight into the video. Let's get into it. Also, hi, my name is Madison. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the family. If you're new here, please like the video, comment down below, press the bell notification, subscribe, do all of the things. I am back on my YouTube grind. I'm so excited. Thank you for all the love on my Kanye West video, which I will put here, as well as getting me to 19K, which is insane. We just hit 18K 2 weeks ago. We're at 19K now, which is crazy, and we're well on the way to 20K. I am floored and I am in awe. Thank you all so much. That being said, I also, if you don't know, have a podcast called Bloodstained, where I talk about history through the lens of true crime. Season 1 is all about slavery, and that's available on all DSPs. The audio is available on all DSPs, and the visuals are available on this very amazing YouTube channel. So if you've done some digging, if you're new here, there's a lot of content for y'all to get into, so start stalking me. If you're interested in any other ways to connect with me, my link tree's in the bio. Definitely go on my other socials. I'm very active on TikTok. I'm trying to get more active on Instagram, but link in the bio to follow me all over there. What else do I want to say? Oh, yeah. And if you're into reading, we have a book club, the Swan Book Club. We meet once a month. We read half a book every month. So, right now, we're going to be meeting in June for the second half of Kindred, which I've been loving. We've been on an Octavia Butler kick, honey. So, it's been wonderful. Definitely hit the link in the my link tree, subscribe to my Substack. All communications about book club are going to be available in my Substack. That's where we vote on days to meet, on different ideas that I have for the book club and all of that kind of stuff. And the link to join the Discord server for book club is also in the link down below. So if you want to read with me, if you want to join the book club, we love to read, we love to gab. We've been enjoying reading our third book together. Please join the book club. It's been great. It's been fun. And I'm so happy we're on book number 3. So if that's interesting to you, all of those links are down in the link tree below. Love y'all so much. Let's get into some housekeeping. Then we'll get into the sinner's conversation. Boom. So, I don't know if y'all know. I know that not all of you follow me on my other socials. I've been kind of not active this week because today, as I'm filming this, Saturday, the 31st, marks a week that I watched my grandfather pass away. It's been a very trying week. It's been a very unexpected week. And I just today decided to muster the courage and the strength to make a video, to film this video that has been promised for y'all for such a long time. So I'm really excited to film it. I've written this script like a few weeks ago after I watched Sinners for the second time. And I just felt like passionate to want to make a video today, and I have to honor that considering the fact that I've been so depressed and sleeping and just in my bed. If y'all know, this year has been incredibly tough for my family. A couple videos down, you'll see that I have a story time of how my house burned down on my 29th birthday. My family were victims of the Eaton fire. If you're interested in donating to the GoFundMe, the link is also in the link tree in the bio. But it's been an incredibly tough 5 months, and my house and my grandparents' house burned out in the Eaton fire. It's crazy because my whole life I felt so blessed to live so close to them. We live 5 minutes away from each other, but it just takes one natural disaster to wipe out both homes that makes you kind of be like, dang, I wish we didn't live so close, but honestly, I wouldn't have traded it for the world. My family, I've been incredibly blessed in my life to be able to live within 20 minutes of all 4 of my grandparents for the majority of my life until I went to college. They went to every grandparents' day, all 4 of them. They visited me in college. They watched my graduation. I spent every Saturday with my dad's parents and every Sunday with my mom's parents while I was home. Never missed a birthday, never missed a holiday, all of these things. I lost my mom's dad in 2022, in May of 2022. He was 99 and had dementia, so it was pretty expected. He was an incredible man as well. But my poppy, who passed away on Saturday, was also an incredible man, and it was kind of an unexpected thing. He kind of started to a little bit I think the stress of the fires really started an acute chain reaction, and he wasn't doing well from March all the way through April into May. He was in and out of the hospital when we couldn't get a diagnosis, and then the last week was just thing after thing after thing. It just so happened that, we went to the hospital because he wasn't doing the hottest, and he was in the ICU, and we ended up watching him pass away. And though it was a very sad moment and sobering, and we were all around him saying we loved him, crying and, comforting each other, it was an incredibly beautiful moment, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But now I'm sitting here, this is the first Saturday without my grandpa alive, and I felt the need to pick up a camera and film. So this is the best you're getting. One of these days I'm going to slap some makeup on and really film for real for you guys. But today is not one of those days. You're lucky you're getting this video, girl. There's enough videos in my repertoire of me looking cute for the camera, but honey, this is the best you're gonna get. It's been a hell of a half of the year for me. We're about to get into June, and I just hope the second half of 2025 will be better and more positive and healing for my family, because Jesus Christ, it's been thing after thing after thing. As we focus on rebuilding, as we focus on burying my grandpa, a lot of emotions are coming up. So I just want to say, for those who knew, who sent me private messages, who've checked in on me, thank you so much. You've been so kind. Since the fires, there have been a list of people who always send me a message encouraging me to continue on, and I am continuing on. I'm deciding to persist. This is the third close family member of mine that I saw regularly that's passed away in my lifetime. And it's one of those things where I'm choosing to not sink into despair. I'm trying to lean into the productivity. I'm trying to push forward and really take control of my fucking life, so I can have the life I want and honor them in the way that I think is best. So that being said, thank you all for the well wishes. This is the best you gonna get for a while, honey. And that's just what it is. Also, I wanted to explicitly say thank you so much for 19K. I had this video, I'll put it on the screen, do really well. It's the first video I've ever made that's reached over 30K in views in 2 weeks, which is absolutely bonkers. I've been in the 20K kind of jail for a long time, and I haven't really been posting that actively on here. So it just made me feel great to know that I was taking the commentary side of my YouTube channel seriously, and I was being rewarded for that. So again, thank you for 19,000 subscribers. I'm so in awe of how this YouTube channel has morphed and changed over the 3 years that I've had it. I stand by every video that I've ever made on here, and I really, really appreciate you guys, both old and new, for following me in this journey. And there's so many videos to come. After this Sinners video, I believe I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to put the thumbnail up here, I'm going to be doing a commentary video talking about Superhead, aka Corinne Steffens, Kat Stacks, and Selena Powell. So I'm really excited about that video. That's been one that's been cooking up in my brain, but there's a lot to come on this channel. So be there or be square. Okay. That being said, rest in peace to my poppy. Let's get into the Sinners review, shall we? So to start, I just want to shout out to Ryan Coogler and all the people who were involved in the Sinners movie. This is one of the most incredible examples of how important it is to have creatives and humans in charge of art and creating art when it comes to media. A lot of people don't really understand the connection between movies and propaganda. That's a conversation for another day. Our media and propaganda, that's a conversation for another day. I am triggered by the Beyonce discourse on TikTok, Buki. But what I will say is, Hollywood is another microcosm of our greater society, and oftentimes it's used as soft power to force and enforce and indoctrinate us on how we should view ourselves as Americans and how we should view each other. And I just think that as we move more towards a more fascist United States, as we move more towards, a country that is getting more Christian and more conservative, seeing this movie pop up at this time was just so sobering and so impressive. It is a testament to human psyche. It's a testament to creativity. It's a testament to how important art is, especially in the worst of times. And I'm so happy that it was made. I'm so exhausted of Hollywood just being lazy and remaking old movies and doing cash grab type shit. And I'm just so happy that, this movie was able to be made at this particular time. I think it's a sign of the times in a lot of ways. And I think it's just a beautifully done movie from start to finish. It's one of the only movies that I've been extremely passionate about in the past 2 years, which makes me really happy. And I'm so happy it's seeing the success it deserves because it had everything and I loved it so much. I want Hollywood to hopefully pay attention to this and stop leaning on trying to phase out humans when it comes to creating art like this. Stop having AI do script writing and all of these important things, because movies like this show and prove that uniquely, conceptually thought out, long-term, slow burn movies made by humans based on their life experiences are something that can never be fucking replaced. And instead of saying, hey, this vampire movie did really well, let's just make a ton of vampire movies, which is usually how Hollywood reacts because it's a capitalistic system. I want them to really pay attention to the fact that this was a uniquely created one-off movie that really only Ryan Coogler could make based on his life and his experiences. And we need to lean into more indie, more small, more conceptual forms of art and taking chances on new artists, new directors, new cinematographers, new score people, new everything in the Hollywood industry, because that is really why people go to the movies, to have an experience like this. I don't know if they will, but they fucking should, okay? So I just want to let y'all know this, because I know a lot of people scrambled out with their Sinners reviews, and a lot of them, no shade, are regurgitations of each other, talking about the mojo bag and the different moments in the film and, this and that, little details and stuff like that. This is not that. This is a sociological take on the movie Sinners. This is my take on the movie Sinners. This is not going to be we're going through every frame talking about the different Easter eggs. That is not what this video is. There's a ton of videos like that, so go watch those videos. This is going to be a big brain take, a macro take, talking about sociological themes within the movie. That being said, I'm going to start off with some of my favorite things in the movie that are more Easter egg-like really quickly, because I want to just hammer them out and say them, and then we'll get into the bigger, longer themed parts of the movie that I think are incredibly important, that I haven't really seen a lot of people discuss other than some of my favorite TikTok mutuals on their quick take videos. So yeah. As we know, there's so much symbolism in the movie. Like I said, there's a ton of other videos talking about Easter egg takes that you can watch that I will direct you to, but this is going to be just a quick succession part where I'm just going to let y'all know that I had my eyes open and I was paying attention to some of the symbolism and simplistic things that were being shown visually and not explicitly said. So the first thing was, of course, the Asian representation. And I think it's important to note that a lot of people watched the movie for the first time and said, this is an example of the modern minority myth. Asian people are only out for themselves and da-da-da-da-da. And I think in certain cases, art is obviously subjective, so people are going to take from it what they can. And there's an argument that can be made about this being an example of the modern minority myth. Also, spoilers if you don't get it already. Come on now. Spoilers. But there is an Asian family. This is taking place in the Mississippi Delta, the heart of the blues. And there's an Asian family which was historically accurate. There were Asian people that lived in that area, and oftentimes they owned grocery stores, and that was the representation of the Asian family. A lot of people have a very black and white view of what the South was like during a specific time post-slavery. But there were different people there, and that adds richness to the story. That adds more globalization to people's zeitgeist of what was going on in the South post-slavery. And it adds kind of a nuanced take, the gray area of what was an Asian person's role in a very black and white racially world. And, there's discussions about the two different grocery stores, the white side and the black side, and how they were able to maneuver through both in certain spaces, but were often more relegated to the colored space of the world because they weren't white, obviously, which I think is an important conversation about race in the United States that I just don't think gets talked about explicitly. That's why a lot of people were shocked that there was Asian representation in the film, because a lot of people have a very black or white understanding of what the South was like and is like. But there's a rich history of many different cultures being there and being excluded from there and being there again and stuff like that. So thought that Asian representation was incredible, very important. very important culturally, opened up a lot for a lot of just layman's people watching the film to understand what was going on in the South at the time. Again, I think it's important that to note that art is subjective, but I think when Ryan Coogler himself says, hey, this is not supposed to be representative of the model minority myth, it's supposed to be representative more of a mother and with a child that's alive that had her child threatened and is watching her husband turn into a vampire. It's more emotional. It's not her being selfish about herself and trying to be different than the Black people that a lot of people added into that. I think it's important to note when the director chooses to say and come out and say, that's not why I put these people in the film. You can, of course, have your own interpretation, but I think, again, when they say that, it's important to take heed to that and kind of lean into why Grace represented this, why Grace was the one to ultimately invite the vampires in to have the final showdown. It's more interesting that way. The next thing, and I only saw a couple people talking about this, but when you enter in to the film, instantly there is this juxtaposition between the vampire attack and and religion, and we'll get into that in the other parts of this video about the longer, bigger sociological themes about Christianity and Blackness and all of that. But I think one of the most blatant unspoken examples of the commentary being made about Christianity in this movie is the fact that the church resembled a KKK hood. And I know that was on purpose. I think that it was important to notice that because there is a conversation being had throughout this whole movie about what Christianity is, what it did to our people, how it was used to dominate and push white supremacy throughout many different cultures, including the Irish, which we will get into. But I think that just that symbolism of the church resembling the KKK hood, and then every time in that beginning sequence when he's in the church, having the juxtaposition of the vampire attack towards the end when Sammy gets his face scratched, which is when, Remick is finally like, I'm Irish, and they use Christianity against us, and there's the whole baptism scene and all of that kind of stuff. There's this constant juxtaposition of Christianity in terms of how Black people internalized it and dispense it versus I think its actual intentionality. And again, if you want to know my thoughts about Christianity, boom, I have a podcast episode called Black People Shouldn't Be Christian. I know it's a triggering title, but it's one of my podcast episodes. So again, link in the bio for the podcast on DSPs for audio only, but you can watch that visual right here on my YouTube channel. Okay, obviously this is a very obvious one, but the significance of the vultures showing up to show danger. They first show the vultures when the twins are buying the old sawmill, and then the KKK Grand Wizard, again, spoilers, comes to sell it to them. They don't know he's a KKK Grand Wizard at the time, but the vulture comes. As he's driving in, you see one singular vulture come. And so I think, obviously, if you know what a vulture is, they are not people. They are a sect of animal that kind of waits till something dies to pick at its carcass and stuff. And they can signify not an omission, but foreshadowing of death, perhaps, kind of similar to a crow and stuff, because usually vultures will circle the sky when they know like a birth is happening or a death is happening. So to see this vulture come in and swoop right when the Grand Wizard comes, when the twins are buying the sawmill in the beginning, and then you see the three vultures circling, I think to signify the three vampires that were going to be created when the Native Americans come to the white family's house to be like, yo, did you let that vampire in? And then they dip out of the movie. Entirely, those three vultures that are circling that little cabin, I think that's important. I think they, are often used to signify something terrible, foreshadowing, negative coming down the pike. So the vultures, obviously, that's something that a lot of people have said, but yeah. great. The thing is, people don't understand in filmmaking that you are using a visual medium, so you have to use every sense. You're using sound, you're using sight, you're using dialogue, you're using a bunch of things. So not a lot of things need to be really explicitly said. But having that extra touch shows you already unconsciously that there's something coming, something else is happening, something more than you expect is happening in this scene. And later in that scene, by the time the scene is complete, all three of them are vampires. Okay, yes. The gold coins. This is the last of my quick, Easter egg symbolism to start off this video. The gold coins, I think, are important because they signify a trade, and they signify to me capitalism, and the people who are tempted to take those gold coins often become the next vampires, right? So, for example, Remick falls out of the sky. People have said it connotes like a fallen angel energy, which I think is really a really cool idea because he just drops out of the sky, burning in the sun, and he offers the wife and the guy gold coins to let him inside. And he's like, they took my money. I left my wife there. They're torturing her. I'm a coward. Please take this money and let me in. They take the money. These are gold coins that aren't really, from what I understand, they aren't representative of the normal money that they take in that area or that they've seen, but they know it's valuable because it's solid gold coins. So they take that money, they accept him in, and then all of them become vampires. The next time you see the gold coins is with Mary, where Stack is, they're in there like, oh, will they, won't they bag? And then Mary's like, I'm going to go and see what they're about and feel them out to see if they have any real money. And if they do, then we'll invite them in and da-da-da-da-da, because we do need to make money tonight. And Stack's like, go. And it's like, so many reasons why this is unsafe and not a cool situation to have her lead, but the fact that she took it upon herself to go, she went. So boom, goes outside to suss them out, and she's the next victim of the situation. She turns into a vampire next. She takes her gold coins, brings it to Stack. He is the next vampire, and we see this kind of continue on until it's kind of like, okay, once Stack turns and everyone is asked to leave, that's when everyone just becomes a vampire because of unforeseen circumstances, and it's no longer this very clear line of whoever takes the coins is next to go. Again, to me, that signified capitalism, greed, the hunger for money, and how that inevitably allows whiteness as a culture to be let into you and your life. Capitalism is usually for people of color or people on the margins of society the only way for you to maybe be considered white or be treated with more respect, and that is in quotations. I think a lot of Black people are fooled by Black capitalism. Bing, look at this great podcast video here. Black people shouldn't be capitalists. It happened right directly after the Black people shouldn't be Christian episode, but I talk more about my thoughts on capitalism, how it relates to slavery and other things in that video, in that podcast episode specifically. But, you see how this, capitalism in our society, I think, is one of the biggest tools to propagandize people to, unfortunately, let whiteness in and invite the vampire into their lifestyle once they start focusing on money with the promise that they'll have a better life and all of these things, when in actuality whiteness still exists as a dominant culture. So they still have the means to say, yes, you're invited into the club. No, you're not invited into the club. Who cares how much money you have? Which I think is, the short end of the stick. And so to have whoever takes a coin be the next vampire, I think, is a very powerful message that I didn't see a lot. And I think it, again, is indicative of capitalism and how Damn it. Hold on, y'all. But yeah, I think it's indicative of how capitalism enters into our life, enters into our culture, and waters it down and creates kind of a vampiric, parasitic relationship with it. And a lot of people are brainwashed to think that money is the key to all things that are stable and safe in this country, which just isn't factually true. And you see that obviously in, Stack and Mary trying to convince Annie and Smoke to come outside so they can join them and we'll make money and we'll be safe and all of these things, which obviously wasn't true, because at the end of the day, the real reason why they're vampires is for Remick to feed off of their gifts. And that is the double-edged sword of the situation. And I think that's important. So yeah, that is the last of my little Easter egg section. Comment down below what you think about those Easter eggs. If you have Easter eggs that you want me to comment on, maybe in the comment section, definitely comment them down below because I want to hear what y'all think. But that is kind of the end of that. Now we're going to enter into the bigger concepts, the bigger themes, which is more of the sociological conversation that I want to have about this movie that I don't see a lot of people having. So the first sociological concept is whiteness as a non-culture. And this is something you learn fairly easy and early on when you're doing sociology or doing a social science. But the concept of what whiteness is as a culture and why when you ask white people what white culture is, they often say, oh, well, I'm German, so German culture or Irish culture. And it's like, no, we're talking about whiteness. We're talking about white culture. We're talking about white supremacy and how you think that you're protecting something, which is white culture, but you can't even define it. White culture is a non-culture, meaning it is defined by negatives. It is not this. It is not that. It is directly opposed to this. There is no whiteness without blackness also existing, which is why in my podcast Bloodstain, we talk about how slavery is a true crime story, and not just what happened to the enslaved population, but the concepts of racial hierarchy that got reified through slavery, that were introduced in the Crusades, and how they kind of affect everyone's day-to-day lives currently is also a true crime story. But again, podcast down below. But again, whiteness is not, if you sit there and think what white culture is, and when I say white culture, I mean, what are the conservatives protecting? What are white people protecting? What are the incels protecting? What are the red pill manosphere, annoying ass Charlie Kirk, Nick Fuentes, Jordan Poole, or whatever? Like, what are those dickheads protecting? And I think if you press them enough, they wouldn't even know what they're protecting. And what you realize is when you kind of scratch the surface, you realize that whiteness is like this amorphous blob that is undefined, but the boundaries of it are heavily policed. And it's very clear what it isn't, but it is not very clear what it is. And its flexibility and its fixed nature is what allows certain communities to be adopted into whiteness and other communities to be purposely X'd out of whiteness, right? So, for example, if you've ever heard the statement, white supremacy means Asian sometimes, Latina sometimes, brown sometimes, but black never. There is this dichotomy, and the rest of the people who don't fully fit in that dichotomy are sometimes adopted and sometimes not included, right? Whiteness is fixed and fluid at the same time. And I think that's why people struggle with understanding that it's a social construct and what that actually means. And we'll get into that later in this. But, I think the whiteness as a non-culture being represented via the vampire, via Remick's story, is incredibly powerful in the Sinners movie and just shows the layers that Ryan Coogler was working with when it came to conceptually thinking of this movie. Blackness is not only defined by whiteness, but there are other things that define what black culture is. Our culture is one of the most exported things America has to offer. Our music, our style, our the way we speak to each other, all of these things are marketable things that are unique to Black American culture. And it's not even just Black American. We're talking diasporic wide. Afro-Latina and Afro-Latino culture. You have your Black African people from straight from the motherland. You have your Caribbean people. You have all of these different sects of Black diasporic culture that are uniquely them, but they aren't also defined purely on what they're not, which whiteness is, right? And again, whiteness is a fixed and fluid thing. And whenever it suits itself, in order to continue to exist in the future, meaning evolve for the times, it has to be fluid because then they can continue to be the dominant culture forever. So I think obviously the most explicit example is obviously the fact that Remick was Irish, and Irish people have a very similar history to most marginalized people who were affected by Anglo-Saxon people, European people, through colonization and violence and dominance and forced labor and all of those things. A lot of what was enacted to the indigenous population on this planet, on this land in America, was already enacted on the Irish before. You know, changing their culture, telling them their culture was of the devil, forcing them to conform and assimilate to what they defined proper civilized culture to be, killing them, forcing them to work, forcing them to submit to a white Christian God in a very specific way. All of these things that were done to the native population here, as well as the enslaved population that was brought here, as well as the indigenous populations in Africa, in Central and South America, and so on and so forth, right? So there's this joint understanding of dominance by this entity of whiteness through the same mediums. And so a lot of people don't really understand this because in our modern day, if you have white skin, you're white, obviously. But Irish people were not considered white. Italian people were not considered white. All of those things are very new concepts of they're new entries into whiteness. They're very new entries into whiteness. And I think there's a book on it. If I can, I will flash it on the screen here. But it's the concept and the idea that these people used to be disgusting. People talked about throwing trash and bottles at the Irish when they came through Ellis Island and shit like that. Like, they were not thought to be good individual people. They were not in the majority group. But as whiteness, contracts and expands as it sees fit, Irish people and Italian people soon got defined as white, and the dominance of white culture continued to expand into our modern day, if that makes sense, and evolve into our modern day. I think there comes a point with this very negative non-culture where they realize that it's fixed on them being the majority, because if they're not the majority, they don't have the leverage to enact this very destructive and violent form of white supremacy on other people. So they have to continue to add in groups of people so that they continue to be the dominant culture. So Irish people are now considered white after this experience of being not only dominated through the colonization of their lands and the killing of their people, scalping, the concept of scalping was done first for the Irish, indigenous Irish people. All of these things were done first to the Irish people that we now look at America's original sins. But then through that process, they got assimilated into whiteness, because when it came to this country, now we have to be dominant and controlling the land. And so we have to define ourselves differently as Europeans versus the native population that lives and exists here, and the slave population that we're bringing here to build this country. So now you are considered white. You may not be considered fully white, like, blue blood, English, British, coming from aristocracy type of thing, but you are white now here because you are doing the bidding of whiteness. There's a deep pain in history when it comes to the violence that a lot of Irish people enacted to the indigenous population here, as well as the enslaved population here. There's a rift here. Even though we have similar histories, they chose the whiteness, and I think that's where the betrayal comes in. But I do want to talk about. So I think having Remick as the central vampire who's turning everyone in the town is very powerful because of the unique history of the Irish people and what they chose. And he fully is leaning into being a vampire and spreading this doctrine, as opposed to doing something like Annie, where it's like, kill me, free me, please. I do not want to live this life, which is a completely different take than what obviously Remick was able to do. He clearly had, the lore of Remick is he came here in the early 1900s and completely ran amok straight from Ireland. But that being said, let's continue. I do want to talk about like the creation of whiteness really quickly. And a lot of this I've learned just through getting my sociology degree, but there's a great documentary called Exterminate All the Brutes. Boom. Watch it. It's on HBO Max. It's a 4-part docuseries. Each part is about an hour to an hour and a half, and it's incredible. It is a documentary, created by Raoul Peck, who did the documentary for James. Why can't I remember his name? He's a wonderful. I'm gonna put it. Editing me will put I'm totally drawing a blank, but he's incredible and I love him. Called "I'm Not Your Negro." He directed that documentary, but this documentary is based on a book called Exterminate All the Brutes, and that book's title is taken from the book Heart of Darkness. If you know, you know. It's something that a lot of us read in high school, which talks about the Belgian Congo and what was going on there. But it's an incredible documentary that I think really explains the way of the world very incredibly through themes and understanding who the brutes actually are versus who we've been indoctrinated to think that they are. And in that movie, there's a wonderful section where they talk about whiteness, specifically talking about how it was created in the Crusades. For those who don't know, the Crusades were a series of holy wars, and I say that in quotes because that's how it's normally taught to us, religious wars that happen in like Europe and greater Europe and stuff like that, in I think between the 10th century and the 13th century, where basically this is a transformative period where European Anglo-Saxon Christianity became the dominant religion globally, right? This is a transformative period. How we're taught about it is it's a fight between Islam and Christianity and Jewishness and all of these things. In reality, it was the way Europeans took over Islamic trading routes. This is the first transformation of power and wealth from the East to the West, okay? And by doing that, concepts of white supremacy, the foundation of white supremacy was created because what they would do is that they would test people for blood purity. If you were white and Anglo-Saxon and Christian and European, your blood was thought to be pure. And these are concepts that were reified in the Crusades time period. If you were Muslim, if you were Jewish, you had dirty blood. And this is where we start to see the foundations of white supremacy start to rear their ugly heads. Now, again, we're taught of it as if they're just purely religious wars, when in actuality, it was the church itself consolidating wealth and power to continue to dominate not only the European region, but other regions in the world from that point forward. Again, watch the docuseries. It's incredible. But this is where we start to see the concept of purity being tied to religion and blood, and what religion and blood that was tied to. When we see kind of similar things, like whiteness being created in the face of violence, abject violence, and then being tied to blood via the Crusades, you see a similar action being taken with this vampiric situation. Everyone in that film is introduced to the vampiric hive mind via a violent interaction with a vampire, and through that they become engulfed in this hive mind creation where their culture is now everyone's culture, and it becomes an allegory for what whiteness has become and what we've allowed it to become in our society. So again, to me, the modality of vampire being villain in Sinners is indicative of whiteness. You can put it as whiteness, you can put it as Christianity, which we'll get into. You can make it whatever you want to make it, but it's this concept of this social construct that is contracting and expanding, that is fluid and fixed, that you have to essentially be jumped into via violence or some sort of cultural relinquishing of who you used to be. You see this in the advent of things like residential schools for the Native American population, this violent changing of culture and language into the white man's version of what that should be. And you see that with the vampires and the role that the vampires play. Now we're all one. Now we can fellowship. And the reality is, what you're relinquishing by allowing yourself to be turned into a vampire is your unique sense of self, which is some of the most important qualities of making everybody unique, diverse, and human. And I think we can see many similarities of the damage the social concept of whiteness has done to our greater society, which is removing specific cultural importance from even white identities, indigenous pagan identities, that a lot of white people haven't really contended with. A lot of white people just know that they're white. But it's like, okay, but what about the indigenous German population, the indigenous Irish population? What were their beliefs? What were their practices? And over time, since they were of the first people to be scalped and violenced and colonized and all of that. And all of that violence came this way to this country and was disposed to populations of color, other indigenous populations throughout the world. They have really lost touch of what their individual cultural ties are, which is the beauty of the movie. Right? There's reasons why Sammy and Annie and these people were like, Remick was laser focused in needing them to be a part of his vampire horde. And it's because of the unique cultural gifts that they had. Sammy was, I forgot what they called the spirit or the musical spirit who was able to pierce the veil between past spirits and the present and the future and all of that kind of thing. But Annie was a hoodoo priestess. She was somebody that had a deep connection, a deep spiritual connection to the past, to the present, and to the future. And that need to have those two specific people become a part of the hive mind, and those two specific people were not a part of the hive mind and were divinely protected against that, I think goes to show how important and fiercely we have to fight for our individual culture and what it really truly means to our development as a people. What Ryan Coogler is doing by imploring vampires to represent the evil of the concept of whiteness, not necessarily the evil of white people, but the concept, the social construct of what whiteness represents culturally, sociopolitically in our current society, what modern whiteness has done. And that is what the vampires represent. That's what Remick represents. That's what the hive mind represents. That's what all of it represents. And I think that is literally genius. Creating that space between societal concept versus actual person is also important in creating that space, because a lot of people struggle with understanding whiteness and race as a social construct when it has real material effects in your life. And that's what people really struggle with, because when you say race is a social construct, people are saying, yo, I'm black, so I go outside and I experience these things in real life. So how is it purely a social construct? And I'm just going to quickly explain how it's a social construct. Ethnicity is real, right? We have our phenotypic things that you can visually see on someone that shows ethnically where they're likely from. But what whiteness and what blackness means are social constructs. The fact that blackness is a negative, pejorative, and whiteness is not in our language is a social construct that was decided amongst men, by men, for control and power. And I think that highlighting what whiteness actually as a social construct has done to our society is by making it the villain in the movie via the vampires is brilliant. So the next part that I want to talk about is the concept of survival and a new look at cultural appropriation. I think that this is a very important topic that directly relates to what I was talking about when it comes to whiteness being both fluid and fixed, that has heavily policed borders, because evolution and the changing of times is what decides it for whiteness as a concept, whether it's going to be expanding or contracting, right? So what I'm trying to say is, how can I put this? Octavia Butler, and if you're interested, I think this is going to be the next 3 books because it's a series we're reading for book club. So again, join the book club server, link in the bio. Join the Substack, link in the bio to get more updates on that. But Octavia Butler has a series called the Xenogenesis or the Exogenesis series. I always mix up the names, so I say them both. It's a series of 3 books, and it is one of her most sci-fi centered books. And it's a little freaky, child. There's some alien freakiness going on, but it's an incredible 3-book series that I think everyone should read because it asks you certain specific questions about consent, humanity, what it means to be human, and a lot of other conversations that I think it really illustrates well. And one of the things when I watched Sinners that I also saw in this book series is this concept of evolution. Now, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the book series, and you can, read it yourself or join the book club if you want to read it and discuss it with other people. In this book series, essentially, the world has gone to shit. Nuclear war has taken over and Earth has become uninhabitable. But before Earth became uninhabitable, it was being observed by an alien population. And as Earth went into nuclear war, things became uninhabitable, blah, blah, blah. This alien population picked up select few people and took them into their ship to basically preserve humanity, right? Now, these people were taken up and put into a sleep stasis, so they have no idea what happened to them after the world went to shit, after they lived through a nuclear war and were trying to survive, right? So it centers around, I'm not even going to tell the character's name, but basically one character is woken up from this situation, from this perpetual sleep, not really knowing how long she's been asleep in this alien spaceship. And they're basically, one, showing themselves to her and also telling her what their plan was. And this specific alien species, what they do is they go around different planets. They see that they're in trouble. They take the living beings from those planets and they create a new version of themselves based on the genes and the attributes that they take from that new living being, right? So in the case of humanity, they take what they need in terms of DNA and genes and all of these things, and they mate with those humans to create a new species of their own species that is able to survive in said planet. So, sorry, that's kind of a little confusing. Essentially, their goal is to re-inhabit Earth, rehabilitate Earth, so that the new species that they breed between human and themselves are able to live on Earth and create a new Earth, eventually turning Earth into something to consume, where they then move on to another planet and do the same thing. The people that the humans are meeting are not people, but the aliens that the humans are meeting have been doing this for as long as life has existed. Gone to these planets, noticed something was wrong, decided to take the living beings from those planets, decided to mate with them in order to create offspring that could evolve and continue to evolve. And then from there, put them on the planet to exist. When the planet became old and consumed, they moved those people on, and those new versions of the alien species went to another planet and did the same thing. And then those new versions of the alien species went to another planet and did the same thing, right? So this idea of constantly needing to evolve to continue to survive conditions where eventually they will have a little piece of all of these living beings from all these different planets to make them effectively the strongest living beings in existence, pretty much, right? And the issues with this is there's no consent involved, and they assume that because they're saving these living beings from their circumstances, that this is what they want, when in actuality they're being forced into a way of being so that these aliens can continue to evolve and live. And there's a lot of conversations about whether this is moral and consent and all of these things, but it reminded me so much of whiteness as a culture and its need to constantly evolve and add in and adopt and absorb new identities to continue to be the dominant culture and to continue to control our lives and force us to live under white supremacy, right? Again, one of the most basic versions of this evolution is the fact that Irish people were not considered white until they were considered white, right? That greatly expands the reach of who is considered white, and it just takes a couple generations to brainwash themselves into thinking they've always been white, and the privileges that they get associated with being white, they then enact that white supremacy on other marginalized groups that could never be white, like Black people or other people of color who are brown. And then as life continues, the concept of being white now gets expanded to include another group of people. And I think we're seeing a little bit of an expansion of whiteness to include certain Latin communities, certain Asian communities. I wouldn't say that they're explicitly considered white yet, but they're used specifically as a tool of white supremacy to create distance between Black people and white people. And that's a conversation for another day. That is a model minority myth conversation, particularly when it comes to Asian people. But what people don't get is like whiteness can only exist the way those aliens can exist. And because it doesn't die out, it can't die out, because then that would give all the people affected by white supremacy around the world the ability to attack the people that have ruined their material conditions. They are constantly searching and looking for groups to envelop so that they can continue to expand and be the majority globally, right? And so you have a lot of conversations lately about birth rates and whiteness and conservative values and, forcing women into having children and all of these things, which point to the fact that there is this innate fear that white people are no longer going to be the majority. And they haven't been the global majority. We know that. But in this country, they are not going to be the majority. So what we're seeing now, and why I feel very powerful in this time, despite all the news, and again, I'm very privileged and everything, but why I feel powerful is that the night is darkest before the dawn. And this is whiteness's final death rattle as a stranglehold majority community in this society, because they cannot continue to grow and continue to expand by including groups of people that just aren't physically white anymore. You know what I mean? Like now they're trying to include certain Latinx populations, certain Asian populations are kind of teetering at, but now because they've put so much focus on phenotypically, ethnically looking white, they are at a wall now. They cannot continue to expand and envelop these groups because these groups have their own cultures that are very strong and are cultures that are antitheses to whiteness. And so what we're seeing is white the concept of whiteness pulling at all the levers to continue to remain in control, which is impossible. So they're scrapping this whole shit for parts. They're continuing to lean into crazy fascism, crazy religious concepts and conservatism, crazy capitalism, all of these things, ignoring the fact that the world is dying, ignoring the fact that they are slated to be the minority at some point, no matter what they do. And it's interesting to see. Sociologically, it's interesting to see. It's annoying to have to experience, but it's interesting to see because their identity hinges on being forever able to evolve and envelop. And we're no longer at that point where they can continue to envelop and say, okay, we'll do the Germans now. The Germans are a part of us. The Jews are a part of us. These people are a part of us, and they can be considered white. That's no longer, they can't continue, similar to capitalism, they cannot continue to have unbridled exponential growth, and they have hit their wall at this point. And this is the death rattle. We're experiencing the death rattle and the crackdown and the extremism that comes from that because they know that their time is running out. And it's very interesting to see how these boundaries are fixed and fluid, even more so as they try to figure out how they're going to get out of this bind that they've created themselves. There is a need for whiteness to continue to consume identities, to be able to continue to be the dominant force of how we create and measure beauty, civility, and structure. And again, like I said, we are at the death rattle stage. They cannot continue to do this unbridled without pushback. And so what they're doing is trying to confine certain rules and boundaries, force women into certain positions, and create this very clear last pull for whiteness to be the majority and whiteness to be the standard. And it's not going to happen. Again, exterminate all the brutes. Watch it to the end. You see what I'm talking about. So I think it's important that this whiteness as a concept being shown through the media of sinners as vampiric, as a parasite, as something that consumes in order to survive and expand their reach is incredibly, incredibly important and continues to reify the points that I've made previously about whiteness being a non-culture, about whiteness consuming, contracting, and expanding as it sees fit in order to survive. This concept of evolution as a form of cultural appropriation and survival in order to continue to guarantee white dominance for centuries to come. And we, like I keep saying, we're at the point where they can't continue to do that shit. Point blank. So having vampires be the evil, monstrous, representation of whiteness as a culture is again another brilliant decision. And you see this with Western societies all over the world. You see this all over the world as more and more countries are kicking them out. You have countries in Africa kicking out their colonial overlords that, though gave them independence, have been continuing to extract resources from them via debts and debt peonage and all of these things. You have European nations struggling to figure out what their identity is as more immigrants from other countries that they've destroyed effectively come in to their countries and what that means. And you see how the white people are reacting to that. It's happening all over the place, and it's very interesting to watch as all of these societies that are built essentially on the permanence of a second class of people, being the slave class, being the people that are used and extorted for their natural resources and their culture, You see that represented in how all these Western nations are built on a house of cards. It's the exact concept, but just based on nation states and not individuals. All of these Western countries are built on the backs of all of these countries considered to be the global South. And as the global South really shakes the table and looks at each other and says, hey, there's more of us than there are of them. We own the natural resources. This is our country. We can kick these bitches out. We can do this. You see Western nations shaking and moving to right-wing extremism all over the globe in terms of their identity, because now they're realizing that the faucet of extortion is coming to a fucking end. And now they have to resort to conservative violence to maintain their sense of cultural identity, which is not going to work, obviously. Because even if you think whiteness is, you lean into conservative, you lean into the neo-Nazi things that are popular to basically lick your wounds and make you feel okay with being mediocre and white, you still are, your country is still dependent on these countries, and it's just not going to last anymore as these countries are able to really truly become independent and kick out these overlords, which is, how it goes. I think as we see what's going on with Palestine currently, it's important for us to pay attention to what certain people are saying. The land that is yours is the land that you die for, not the land that you have to kill for. And I think that statement rings true as we see all of the atrocities, the humanitarian crises happening around the world that are constructed by white supremacist Western nations and their dominance that is now in its last phase. Okay. The last thing that I think is really important to talk about is religion as vampire. And it's very clear juxtaposition in the movie, the very clear place religion holds in the movie. You see Preacher Boy's relationship with his father, which I think it's important to point out that Preacher Boy was up and working and helping his mom with his siblings and all of that while his dad was in the fucking church preparing a sermon, stealing his own musical instrument that didn't belong to him and trying to guilt this man into staying instead of, I don't know, going into the fields and helping the family. But that's a conversation for a fucking other day. Religion as vampire, I think, is important because you see, particularly with Black people and Christianity, another shameless plug, Black people shouldn't be Christian, watch the episode. The way Christianity was introduced to us, the reason why it was introduced to us, and I know there's going to be people in the comment section like, Christianity was in Ethiopia before slavery, and it's like, yes, but we're talking about West Africa, we're talking about colonization, we're talking about slavery, and how those Black people in Africa were introduced to Christianity, and it wasn't from their own volition. It was as a means of dominance, it was as a means of control, and it is a stand-in for whiteness and white supremacy because of the way it was used to justify enslavement, forced labor, and what white people wanted it to represent. And I just don't think enough Black people have contended with how their people got introduced to Christianity in the first place and reconciled what Christianity is supposed to teach and how it was taught to us and how we can flip it and change it to be something useful for our community. A lot of people are taught certain tenets in the church, in the Black church, that allow them to be good coons in real life society. The importance of money, the importance of just blind obedience, the importance of ignoring your critical thought, all of these things are vestiges of an indoctrination to make a good slave. And I don't think Black people as a whole have contended with these things. White Christianity is still the way that white supremacy allows us to act as if we exist in the panopticon of self-policing each other to fit in the standards of whiteness that are not meant for us. There are religion is the vehicle for which patriarchy is first it really introduced to our community and reified in our community, where not just patriarchy, capitalism, where the lack of critical thought, all of these things are used to self-police ourselves into thinking that we are thinking free, into thinking we are thinking about a better tomorrow, about a future, about a history, when in reality, these things are meant to show us and prove to us that we are still under the thumb of whiteness. And even if you are a black preacher preaching the same message as the devil, which is indicative of the final fight that happens between Sammy and Remick in the movie, what does that mean when the devil and yourself are praying to the same God? When he knows the words of the Bible, what does that say to you? It goes back to what Delta Slim said about the blues. They are trying to categorize this music as devil worship when it was created by us for us to express our feelings, our pain, and our spirituality. But Christianity would make you believe that it is evil because it doesn't fit within its tight limitations of what is respectable, which has been adopted into you, incepted into your brain via Christianity, white Jesus, and white supremacy via slavery. Right? So when you have these juxtapositions of when Sammy first comes into the chapel with the part of his guitar, and he's having flashbacks of Remick in that final fight, and then then we see what he goes through that entire day and what ends up happening to his cousins and everyone he knew in the community and all of that kind of stuff, and then you have him come back, and then you realize that he chooses the blues over Christianity, and you see that in that moment he's choosing himself. He's choosing cultural protection. He's choosing to not allow whiteness to evolve off of his own culture. He's choosing to hold close to what he knows feels best for him, which is important. And that connection to the spiritual realm, piercing the veil of the future and the past through his music, is a spiritual experience, and reifying that to be correct and true. Religion as vampire, religion as a stand-in for white supremacy is a conversation that a lot of black people do not want to talk about. And a lot of the ways that we are built to exist amongst each other are shaped by things like the black church, which is a hand-me-down from old vestiges of obedience and plantation times, right? I think he did a wonderful job of showing these different avenues that whiteness as a concept infects our society and steals from us and steals our culture and steals our cultural identity, and not just black people, Asian people, indigenous people, obviously Irish people, and I think that final piece of saying, yeah, and look at what we're juxtaposing. The chapel literally looks like a KKK hood. We are showing you images of the church juxtaposed with the actual vampire that wreaked havoc on this community. And yet, and still, a lot of people won't get it, right? And I think it's important that the movie's called Sinners, because who are the sinners in this movie? What is defined by what your religious mind tells you versus what you're actually watching? Who are the actual sinners in this movie? And what's actually the truth about that, and leaning into hoodoo and spirituality with the need for Annie, who is a person that is one that discovers first what's actually happening. It wasn't a haint, it was a vampire, and her expertise in the spiritual realm was the only thing that kept those people alive, right? It wasn't Christianity, because the devil was saying the Lord's Prayer with Sammy as he was about to consume him. And I think the movie brings up really good questions about Black people, Christianity, and the value we put on it, and how it is another vestige of a time past, another way that white supremacy plagues our lives, and another way, like I said, that we continue to self-police each other within the confines of what is respectable to white people and whiteness, which is not the standard and is no longer the standard and will not be the standard because it is on its last death rattle currently. That's why we're living through what we're living through. What else? Let me make sure I said everything. I think that I've seen a lot of TikToks recently, weirdly, about Christianity and Black people, and how I think I saw this one TikTok where a guy was saying, I am pro-Christ more than I'm pro-Black. And I think that's the perfect way to end this video in terms of showing religion via vampire, via white supremacy as a stand-in for those things, and what it takes in this modern American white supremacist society to be a religious Black person. It means forsaking culture and your existence as a Black person in this society for Christianity, instead of having those identities exist in tandem and having them inform each other. You have to pick one, and a lot of people pick Christ over being pro-Black, over radical critical thought of the society we live in, and adopt Christianity, which really placates you into the society we're currently in, but doesn't prepare you for the fact that this society was chosen by a group of people. This chosen society is not forever, and that you're going to have to evolve to and expand your mind and use critical thought to understand what the future is going to be like. That being said, this movie, I could talk about it for hours, but it was an incredible, incredible film that I deeply respect Ryan Coogler for making. And I really appreciate art, unique art in this time where it just seems like we're reheating everyone's old nachos, changing movies. Don't even get me started on the Lilo and Stitch remake. Maybe that's a movie for another day, a video for another day about how our media is turning right. I don't have it in me. But what I will say is fund art, fund artists, fund creatives, support their endeavors. And I hope that with the success of this movie, Hollywood pays attention to what the people actually want. We don't want a live action of anything else. We want unique stories made by real people through their unique lens. That's what we crave. That being said, Black Lives Matter, Free Palestine until it's backwards. You already know what it is. Link in the bio for the book club, for the Substack, for the podcast. Link in the bio for all of those things. Please check me out. Again, keep my family in your prayers, positive thinking as we go through this rough patch. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the new subs. Thank you to the old subs. But I knew I owed you this video, and I wanted to be sure to film it when I had the strength to. But yes, I greatly appreciate all the support and love that I got on my last video, and hopefully we can reciprocate that in this video. I hope you enjoy the commentary. There's more to come. Again, link in the bio for all of that. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell notification. Love you so much. Goodbye.